And then, perfect. Awesome. It shows us live on both of our platforms. So I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for it to alert people, especially since I'm a little bit behind, that we are live and folks can start to join our broadcast. Perfect. I'm going to check Facebook and share this out, and we'll begin momentarily.
Great.
Excellent. I do see it on this side. So please do me a favor, as you all are starting to tune in, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, possibly comment so I know who's tuned in with us, and we will begin momentarily. And share this out. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. Hello, Shannon. Thank you so much for hopping on to the broadcast with us. Well, good morning and happy Thursday to all of you. Thank you for tuning in to our live broadcast, which we've been hosting since COVID first unfolded back in March. You can actually find a lot of our videos available here in the video section of our Facebook page. Of course, at the very same time, we are streaming this on our YouTube channel, Westminster Chamber of Commerce. I am Juliette Abdel. Most of you already know me by now that I'm the president and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce, and I have the unique opportunity to not only work with our amazing businesses that are here in and around our community, but to also meet other partners in the area that provide a wealth of resources to us. So if this is your first time on our page, please do not let it be the last. Make sure that you hit that like button, that you hit the notification so you can get alerted when we go live. And of course, if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for continuing to stay engaged with us. I ask that you also share this out to your network so others are just as familiar with the resources that you have available. I also see with us Adams County's Treasurer Lisa Culpepper. Thank you for hopping onto the broadcast. Good morning to you. So our nonprofit feature is coming back to us on Thursdays, and what we generally do is invite a nonprofit that's in our community or services us to be able to share a little bit more about themselves, answer questions, but also let us know how they're doing during the time of COVID. What have they taken on, and maybe additional health and safety measures that are in place. So I'm excited for our broadcast today. And before I go any further, I want you all to familiarize yourself with the comment section on this video broadcast. The comments is where we will pick up any compliments that we might get, any good morning pleasantries like I'm seeing right now with Lisa and Shannon. And it's also where we will pick up any questions later on in the broadcast. So notice that this is a feature available right below the video if you're viewing on your mobile device. It's also available to you if you're watching it on your computer. So with that, I want to go ahead and just warmly welcome our nonprofit partner that I'm featuring today. And I did the mistake of actually not asking how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, no worries. Like Mickey Rourke.
Yes.
So Rourke Weaver.
And you are with Sparrow Recovery. And so tell us a little bit about Sparrow Recovery and maybe what your role is with the organization as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, we so my name is Rourke Weaver. I'm the executive director of Sparrow. And Sparrow Recovery is both sober living and a recovery center, a 30-day residential-like recovery center up in Evergreen. So providing the uniqueness in it is that we provide all peer-based and recovery-oriented services instead of a clinical or medical approach, which is what you traditionally see in a residential setting or a 30-day treatment. And we are a peer-based, recovery-oriented 30-day residential program, along with sober living.
And I'm sure that that has actually given you a wealth of results entirely different than, hired on clinicians, because they're feeling like they're connected with the people that are directly servicing them.
Yeah, and it's so what we're finding, over the course of the studying substance use disorder, and it's still a very new field, and things are continually being kind of worked on. What we're finding more than anything, one of the major indicators for long-term success is community and connection. And so if we can find a sense of connection and a sense of belonging outside of our culture where we were before, either my drinking community or another person's drug community, and find one that is positive and that accepts us and encourages us to take on a new way of life, the likelihood of long-term sobriety or long-term recovery goes way up. So yeah, we're pretty proud of what we are getting to do, and hopefully bringing some good work to the state.
So I'm going to quickly interject and just share. I know that you mentioned Evergreen as your primary location. You do also have a shelter that's here in Westminster, if I'm not mistaken, on the Adams County side. Was there anything that you wanted to kind of highlight what that facility in general does, if it's any different than the services that you're providing in Evergreen?
Perfect. Yeah. And thank you for that. I've been talking a lot about the Recovery Center. It's also important to recognize that we have 9 sober living homes. And some of those homes are in Westminster. We have homes in Lakewood, Arvada, and Westminster. And we're about to open up one in Denver as well, on the south side or the east side of Denver as well. So we're trying to get into communities and provide services that are close, that are accessible. The houses that we have in Westminster are peer-based. Again, it's all recovery-oriented. We do require that individuals engage in a recovery program. We allow them to define that. Obviously, maintain a maintenance of their sobriety and their recovery. We do require sobriety in the houses, but we will also work with individuals if they have mental health disorders, trying to get them services as well. There's one important factor that I would just say is that the substance use component does need to be a part of it. We are not a mental health specific recovery living. We do hope to get there in time, but for right now, it's substance use specific.
And how long ago did you guys found? And also, how is it paid for? Because I'm assuming that it's not just, these people that are seeking this assistance, that hopefully it's not all falling on them to be able to, cover those costs that are associated with that.
It's a difficult answer, in that sometimes it is, and a lot of times it is, because we are trying to do the work to get awareness around substance use disorder, and it's not a moral failing, but it is actually a disease. And we do still hear a lot of the moral failing rhetoric. And so if you have a substance use disorder, obviously it's your fault. Therefore, there's no supports for you. And so we're making progress, which is very good. I would say in the last 7 years, the state has done a tremendous amount of work to recognize substance use disorder, to provide services for them, and funding. So we are a nonprofit. Sparrow Recovery is a nonprofit. We do have scholarships with the state. There's a tremendous need and not a whole lot of money. So unfortunately, those dollars run out, but we do try and replenish them on a regular basis. We certainly do fundraising. If any of the community members on here are watching, please go to sparrowrecovery.org. And if you feel so moved to donate or make a reoccurring donation, they do go directly to scholarships in the Sober Living and the Recovery Center. So absolutely, we need to get it to a place where all services are accessible. We're trying to keep the cost of living down to a bare minimum. And at the Recovery Center, it's $5,400 for the month of care, as opposed to the average of $30,000. So we're at about 1/5 of the cost of normal treatment. And then at the Sober Living, we're $825 a month. And again, we work with individuals, and we'll try and do scholarships when we can.
Sorry, I was trying to catch up with all of this amazing information that you're providing, and I have captured most of it as best as I can in the comment section. I'm so glad that you're giving us a lot of this information. One, you're telling us a little bit more about Sparrow Recovery and this amazing organization that you guys have founded, that's supporting individuals that are trying to lead a better life. They're really on this road to recovery. And on the flip point of it, you've shared with us, how is it that you're offering these? You're allowing these peer-to-peer support counselors that are providing them the assistance. And not only are you, providing the recovery center where they're answering those questions and helping to guide them, but you're also giving them that complimentary living quarters, which I think makes a tremendous difference, right? But yeah. I've not heard the rhetoric before of this focus on substance use and that the mindset shift that you all are trying to change now, which is that this is beyond a controllable thing for someone. This is really a disease that they're suffering. So I guess that would be one of the biggest barriers for you, is to helping the public understand what that looks like. More so right now during COVID, how has that changed your industry? Do you see an increase in the volume of people that are coming your way? Has there, I would imagine that now we're at home, right? So the environment that people have created around them, their boundaries are stretched. It's no longer what they're used to. And so it might create more or an incentive for them to take part in something that's not that great for them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, there's a lot to unpack on that, but it's been said, one of my favorite quotes about addiction is, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. If connection is the opposite of addiction, then COVID is like the kryptonite to sobriety or to recovery. The isolation that we are seeing, and necessary, right? There's nothing I'm saying that we shouldn't be in these, but if we're going to be discussing substance use disorder and the impact on mental health and substance use, 5 years ago, we heard a lot of discussion around the opioid epidemic, and how awful the opioid epidemic was in 2012 to 2015 and how many lives were lost. We have put to bed the deaths that happened in the opioid epidemic in 1 year. It is astronomical, the amount of lives that have lost in this time frame. It cannot be understated, the seriousness that we are dealing with in the recovery communities, and the relapses that we're seeing, the inability to find sobriety or recovery because there's no places that are open. I will take my hat off and bow deeply to the recovery communities who are trying to do online services, and they provide them every day. But the impacts of COVID on the recovery community, both mental health and substance use recovery being the banner for both of those, I don't know that we have fully understood the impact. I will say personally, I haven't seen loss of life in my community like this ever in my recovery, in my 13 years of recovery. And so, yeah, it is hard to understate or overstate the seriousness that we're dealing with in terms of substance abuse and mental health. But I would say our organization obviously has been affected by this. We are a small nonprofit. We are trying to do scholarships, but because insurance doesn't recognize peer approaches or recovery approaches, it is a private pay thing. We are 5,400. We tried to get the price down, but with the loss of jobs that people are seeing across the state, maybe not stalling out is the best term for the economy, but just a lot of our people they're just kind of getting their lives going, or they're just trying to maintain. So they tend to work jobs that we don't have around anymore, or are starting to come back, I should say. But, there's just, they don't have the resources to afford the services that they need. And we thought that we were doing something that was going to be able to do that or provide something, but we're realizing that, no, we need to work with the state and with the government and with private foundations to try and reduce the cost and reduce the barriers to services as much as humanly possible. And I will say the state is working actively on that. So, sorry, that's a very long-winded answer.
No, I think that was a great, the more that you're talking, the more it fuels my, my interest in asking you a lot of questions. And I know I'm like veering off of like, here's broadly what we'll talk about, but it's very interesting because this is your world. And for outside folks like myself, right, who might be interested in the topic and we think we have a general idea of it, you start talking and it's entirely different than what we're reading and what we're seeing. And so to hear that there is an issue, obviously in access to care because of the inability for insurance to cover it. And now when we have our, our private sector really being decimated through a lot of this, the ability for someone who might need that assistance to have the disposable income or to have additional funds to apply it toward this is almost abysmal. And so we're kind of in this place that you're stuck in a rock and a hard place, because where you would rely on private sector larger donors, it's almost impossible. And then when you turn to government, it's in the same tone. So we do have Lance that's on here, Glenda. I also saw Brian Head, and a few folks have given us some comments. So I'm just going to pull them up your way just to kind of lighten up the mood a little bit. Brian is giving us a nice good morning message, and Shannon has quickly shared, thank you for your work and everything that you're doing. It was really nice to see Lance's comment. I'm just going to pull it up for you over here so we can review it. Lance was sharing a good morning. He's actually out in Florida, but he was telling us, how awesome your work is. He's so glad that somebody is doing this in Colorado, and that he has a brother that has attempted to work or do something similar in the area, and now they're also trying to do it out in Florida. So know that you're not alone as far as the network of support for that across state lines. So glad that Lance was able to hop on and share that. So we touched a little bit about your nonprofit and then some of your homes that you have, across in Westminster, Lakewood, Arvada, soon to be Denver. Your ability to hopefully rely on some fundraising efforts that are there, of course, dollars that might be coming in the form of scholarships for people that are searching this. How has the interaction really changed inside of either those homes or the recovery centers when we talk about COVID? Are there specific guidelines that you've had to put in place? Is there, are you implementing some of those health and wellness and safety practices essentially that you can be doing so you can protect not only those seeking services, but those peers that are providing those to them as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very challenging question, especially when somebody's in crisis, because we usually don't get the phone call until because their life is going really well. We get the phone call when everything's falling apart. So you're constantly doing this weighing back and forth of, can we put this person at risk or not? And how do we keep everybody safe? And by bringing somebody in, especially in an emergent situation, there was, at least in the beginning, we weren't able to get COVID tests as readily. There was like a 5-day waiting period. Like in 5 days, somebody will die. We're dealing with live ammo here. So it's a really challenging environment, because we're having to weigh what's the smarter of the bad decisions, right? Do we let somebody in early and possibly preserve a life, or do we let somebody in early and potentially expose our guests to COVID? And so we've gotten better. The systems have gotten better. We've been able to access tests. So we are mandating that individuals coming in have to get a test. They have to be cleared. It will be great when we can readily access rapid tests in our program. We haven't been able to get those, so we can't do regular tests on the guests, but we hope to have access to that soon. What we're doing right now is once they enter the home and they've been cleared of COVID, they're non-symptomatic and they have a negative test, they essentially are entering a family, and that house becomes their family. And so as a family, they don't need to wear the mask around with each other in common areas. If they go outside, we obviously PPE, like lots of education around washing hands and staying safe. But in the home, they don't wear masks. We do checks every morning in the recovery center, where we're checking the temperature, looking for signs and symptoms. And then in the recovery houses, if somebody was to become symptomatic, because these are individuals who are trying to find gainful employment, so they are in the community, they are working. If somebody was to become symptomatic, that house becomes on lockdown. Individuals are asked to stay in their room until they're non-symptomatic. We provide the food for the house, and try and keep it as safe as possible, and prevent any continued outbreak. So we've been really lucky. We've been able to shut it down within the homes. It hasn't even gotten throughout the house. So we've been really proud of. In the recovery center, we've done really well as well. Very few. We've had 2 cases in the center that we've been able to really mitigate, and they've all been safe. And luckily we've been good there.
I'm going to ask you kind of an off-the-wall question, and I know, I'm trying to be conscious of privacy and, inpatient privacy that might be there, but can you give me a general demographic-wise on maybe what that breaks down into? And when I mean demographics, I mean age-wise, the percentage maybe that are seeking that support, or are you seeing a specific, people in their 20s? There's this many that are in our centers. You don't have to be exact, because again, I know that it's a little bit of an intrusive if I really ask for too much information.
No, I think it's a really good question, and it's one that needs to be discussed. I mean, right now, it is interesting how we go through ebbs and flows in terms of substance use disorders. 10 years ago it was meth, or maybe it was a little bit more than that, but meth was a big thing. Then we had the opioid epidemic, and now meth is on a big rise again. We're still seeing a lot of opioids. That tends to be the majority right now. But we're starting to see much more resurgence of meth. I say all that because a lot of the times that's the youth. It was a younger group that was coming in for the opioid substance use disorder. So we average, Sparrow averages around 30, I would say 32 as its average age. We've worked with individuals as old as in their 70s. And we've worked with an individual as young as in their 18. But we average right in kind of that sweet spot of 32. In terms of other demographics, we're in the recovery center. It's all male right now. I will say in the sober living, our age demographic goes up probably a little bit to 35. More individuals who are kind of in a stable place where they just need a safe environment to live, and they want to, maintain their employment, but they just need supportive living. So a little bit older population there. A lot of it is, indigent, or just is not financially, they're not in a really strong financial position. I think it's important to talk about, because this is things that we as an industry and as a people need to recognize. We are primarily white. It's mostly accessed by white men. We need to look at the reasons for that, and how do we make those services more accessible, to provide those minority communities more opportunities and more options. But it's right now was the hope of Sparrow, was to create more diversity in our communities of recovery, and more accessibility to services that mostly are available to privilege, or white collar, upper middle class, and make those services more available, similar services available to blue collar and working class as well.
So I'm going to hit the nail right on the head with one of the comments that you made, and really try and dig deep into the why behind it. So we mentioned diversity and access to services. We really want people, regardless of class, to be able to access this, especially if they're in need of it. And that's what you've created in the environment for it. Then there's this discrepancy between some of the stats when you say that it's all men that are seeking that. And so I'm going to ask the question of, I'm sure you've analyzed this. You're like, why is it only this specific racial sector or this specific gender that's doing that? And what have you found, if you've been able to figure out, where's that barrier to them?
I think the historically treatment services, if you're going to look at it as its own sector, I will refer to kind of the area that we're in as treatment, right? And when we get to the sober living side of things, you're going to see a lot more diversity. When we look at the residential side, or Sparrow Recovery Center, and where it is trying to kind of disrupt a historical approach to treatment. One, cost is a major component of that. I think that historically treatment has only been available to kind of folks who are rich, right? Upper class. Yeah, it's just a reality. And I think when we're looking at minority communities, we have done a tremendous failure in reaching out to them and creating lines of communication and meeting those communities and really understanding what services that they want to have and curtailing our treatment approach to meet their needs and their desires. I think we have endeavored to create a one-size-fits-all approach instead of looking at really what does diversity look like and making programming respond to those needs instead of saying the community needs to respond to what the programming says it needs to. And I think that we are really we're kind of on the frontier of that right now. And we haven't, so much of this is brand new. I mean, we didn't really have accessible treatment, period. The war on drugs was, 25 years ago. The industry is really just kind of coming out of itself and saying, how do we make these services available? I mean, it was back in the day, it was like, it would just be great if services existed. I think we're really trying to now say, how do we diversify our services, create recovery communities that meet the individual's needs? But I think that, I don't know if that's the best answer, but I think it's the best answer I can give. We're trying.
Yeah, no, thank you for being, transparent with it and sharing here's the logic and the why, because I know that's always a question is, we all can be doing more. And so, where is it that's kind of that blockage or what stops us from doing that? And I know you guys are fairly new. I would consider it fairly new, but you're still able to do so much. To that end, do you have some figures that we want to share with people as far as the number of people that you've been able to have through the programs, or maybe your graduation rates where you haven't seen maybe repeats or anything like that you would want to reference?
Yeah, I mean, in the sober living, it becomes a little bit harder because they're longer term. Our average length of stay is going to be about 3 months. I would say the sober living, there's much less ability, or it's just a little bit harder to get really hard data. On the recovery center, the 30-day program, we're seeing, high, like 70s to 80% graduation rate. Of those 80%, we are seeing really strong engagement in the alumni community. So we're, in total, the reality is it's a losing battle, right? So we see about 30% success rate over time, period. It just is in recovery, right? So it's about 30% as a general. I would say we are seeing around 40 to 45% remained engaged in the program, which to us is a big success. We're making ground. We haven't like solved addiction yet, but we're making ground. And we've had I think at this point, we've had over 150 people in the last year and a half go through the Sparrow Recovery Center. And we have about 84 beds in the sober living right now. And so I think, we're really proud of the impact or the footprint that hopefully we've left on the recovery community.
Well, and I know, we always speak in terms of one, and if it's an individual soul that you've been able to help through volumes, and more than that, obviously is beneficial, but the impact on one person is huge in itself. So I think you've done some great work, 80% graduation rate in that 30-day recovery program, and then some of this longer. Believe it or not, we're nearly to our 30-minute mark, and I really have so many other questions that I want to pick your brain on, but I can't ask you all of those because then everybody's going to be like, this is a long-winded broadcast. So here's what I will say. I have the website and I'm pulling it right back up. And if folks are interested in learning more about your offerings and what you all do and even donating, they can go to this website. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. The only thing I would say on top of it, and I'll say it a little slowly because my name's Funky, so you can always email me if anybody is struggling with a loved one or struggling themselves. I do not believe in just selling Sparrow. I will try and find the right service that is available to the individual and try and get them where they feel they're going to be safe and taken care of. And they can always email me at Rourke, ROURKE, at sparrowrecovery.org. So much simple, but my name's funny.
What's the origin of this? I have to ask you.
No, it's good. I'm actually pretty proud of it. I hated my name when I was a kid, but I'm a big mama's boy, and so my mother's maiden name was O'Rourke, and she's from Boston, and she wanted to keep the name in the family, and I was the firstborn, so she gave me her surname.
Oh, I love that story. Yeah, that's awesome. Look at her holding on to her roots.
She's a tough lady.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. She's not letting go of her history right there.
Yeah.
Your email I have dropped into the comment section for anyone that tunes into this broadcast later on, or maybe has been watching and has additional questions, and maybe be thinking of ways that they can collaborate or support the organization. And of course, if you yourself are watching this and you're like, oh, I might need some assistance in that regard, there's no such thing as a terrible question. You can always ask these people, and they're very comfortable with answering it for you. So I would strongly encourage you to email them. You can always comment it on this video later on, or email our Facebook page as well. And at any point in time, feel free to rewatch this video. If you are watching this broadcast later on, let me know by giving me the hashtag replay so I know that you tuned in with us. And of course, I so appreciate you for coming on to the broadcast with us, Rourke. And I know that we haven't met personally, so this was my very first time getting to meet you, and I'm already thinking of ways that I can continue to get engaged with you guys. So excited to build on our communication lines. We'll be back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. for our next broadcast, and that's a Friday feature of those businesses participating in a We Love Westy sweepstakes, which is the $5,000 cash prize sweepstakes that we have currently going on. Tune in if you are interested in learning more about Cronin and Cronin Orthodontics here in Westminster. And of course, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.